Week 17 of the fantasy football season. His running back starts hits every matchup in championship week for fantasy owners. Kansas City Chiefs at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt sits. Pacheco, he's been back now for a month, and his numbers really haven't been there for this Kansas City Chiefs team of fantasy owners. So this week in a tougher matchup at the Steelers, he's a sit. Kareem Hunt, he did find the end zone last week for this Kansas City Chiefs team. And Kareem Hunt, he's been solid, no doubt about it, this season, where he was sitting on his couch the first month of the season before they signed him. But still, in this ball game, he's not going to get enough touches. It's a tough matchup in this Chief backfield. The last month of the season really hasn't had that value. Najee Harris, he's a flex option. Last week, a non-existent game from Harris at Baltimore, 4.3 fantasy points. And when they're down early and often, obviously, is this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Harris, he's not going to be into the game plan, really. Not much of a receiver out of the backfield. So if you don't score a touchdown or at least get 80, 90 yards on the ground, his numbers haven't been great. So he's a flex option at best. Jalen Warren a sit. Warren, it's been an inconsistent and a down season for him for the most part. I know this could be a ball game where they're trailing points and have to throw the football a lot. And we know Warren's the third down and passing downs back. But this week, he's a sit. Baltimore Ravens at the Houston Texans. It's been a monster season for Derrick Henry. Last week, over 160 yards on the ground. And this week, I think he goes out there and has another big game. He's a must-start. Joe Mixon a start. I know the last couple of weeks, the numbers have dropped off for Joe Mixon. But this game, I think they can get him more involved, especially now with one of their better receivers out for the season and Tank Dell with the knee injury. And I think more touches for Mixon in terms of catching the football out of the backfield and running in between the tackles, in which could be a high-scoring game. Seattle Seahawks at the Bears. Zach Charbonnet, I believe, is going to be the starter for the Seahawks team. We saw Kenneth Walker get injured once again in last week's game versus the Minnesota Vikings, leaving with an ankle injury. And Charbonnet, the backup running back, he gets the start in this game. He's an easy start where we've seen the numbers this season when he's been in the lineup. DeAndre Swift, it's been an up and down first season for him with the Chicago Bear team. And it's tough to put up numbers, obviously, when you're trailing pretty much weekly by big margins of points. So this week, he's a flex option at best. I believe this could be a tight type of game in the beginning, but then Seattle possibly could take off in the second half. But Swift, he's a flex option. Los Angeles Chargers at the New England Patriots. J.K. Dobbins, he got activated off the IR. 21-day window opened up for J.K. Dobbins. But if he does play in this game, I think he's going to be a start. It's a good matchup at the New England Patriots. Gus Edwards, he really hasn't done much to overtake this backfield. And Dobbins is definitely a missing part in this offense for the Los Angeles Chargers. So if Dobbins plays even on, let's say, 10, 15 touches in this ball game, I still believe he can help fantasy owners in this start. And Gus Edwards is a start if J.K. Dobbins isn't playing in this game. So Edwards last week had a good ball game. This week is a good matchup at the New England Patriots, where their defense has trouble stopping running backs this season. We saw last week James Cook found the end zone twice in that game. So like I said, if Dobbins plays, he's going to be the start. And if Dobbins is out, Gus Edwards will be a start. Ramondre Stevenson a start. Last week, a good game for Stevenson on the ground. And all season long, he's been a solid number 2 running back for fantasy owners is Ramondre Stevenson. So this week in a decent matchup, and you know this New England Patriot team, they want to balance it out and not have Drake May go out there and throw the football 40, 45 times. I believe we could see a similar game plan like they did at the Buffalo Bills. Keep the offense of the Chargers off the field and get long drives to chew some of that clock up. So Stevenson to start this week. Denver Broncos at the Cincinnati Bengals. Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, they're all sits. You just can't trust this backfield over there for this Denver Bronco team. 1 week, it's a different running back getting numbers and getting the most touches. And we saw last week where Estime was the leader, where he was out of the game plan for a couple weeks. So this week, it could be Williams. It could be a McLaughlin if he's healthy, getting things going. But I just would stay away even in a good matchup at Cincinnati. Chase Brown, he's been a top 5, top 10 option over the last month of the season since Zach Moss went out with injury. And even in the tougher matchup this week, he's a must-start. Is Chase Brown with the receiving prowess out of the backfield. And in between the tackles, he's been solid. Arizona Cardinals at the Rams, James Conner, he's had a great season. He got the contract extension a few weeks ago. I know he left last week's ball game with the knee injury, but if he plays, he's a must-start. Is James Conner. If he doesn't play, it looks like it's down to Michael Carter. Jay Dallas in the backfield for this Arizona Cardinal team. Trey Benson and DeMarcado, I don't know if they're going to play in this game. And they were out last week, so it'll be Carter and Dallas, like I said, and they will be sits in this game. So if Conner plays, he's a start. And if it's Carter or Dallas, this sits Kyron Williams. Last few weeks here, he's really gotten things going, and he's been a main staple of the offense once again, where he took a backseat a little bit once Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua returned. But the last 3-4 weeks, he's had games over 100 yards. He's found the end zone as Kyren Williams, and this week in a good matchup versus the Cardinals, he's a start. Carolina Panthers at the Bucs. Chuba Hubbard, what a season it's been for him. He got a contract extension a few weeks ago from this Carolina Panther team, and this week at Tampa Bay, I would give him the starting nod. He's been one of the best running backs all season long in fantasy football, is Chuba Hubbard, and he's been matchup proof. Rashad White, Bucky Irvin, one of the best running back tandem in all of the NFL, and last week both of them went out there, had a good ball game at the Dallas Cowboys. This week, good matchup versus the Carolina Panthers that can't stop anyone. And both these backs, I believe, go out there once again, have good games. New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills. Breece Hall will start. Bills, believe it or not, one of the worst run defenses in all the league in terms of giving up fantasy points. So Breece Hall, it hasn't been a great season for him. Obviously, with guys like Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson in this offense, and the Jets trailing in a lot of ball games the majority of the season, numbers are definitely taking a hit. Where last season, believe it or not, with Zach Wilson, the Jets were better record-wise, and Breece Hall was better fantasy-wise. But this week, even in a game at Buffalo where they could be trailing and chasing points, he's a start. James Cook a start, one of the more explosive backs in all pro football. Last week, a big game, finding the end zone twice versus the Patriots. And this week versus a Jet defense that can't stop anyone, he's a start. Indianapolis Colts at the New York Giants. Jonathan Taylor last week with a ball game. He had over 200 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. This week, a great matchup with the New York Giants. And Jonathan Taylor, after he dropped that football out of the end zone crossing the goal line a few weeks ago with Denver, he definitely had a chip on his shoulder last week, had a big game. So this week, Giants can't stop anyone. They're obviously tanking. They're trying to get that number 1 pick locked up, and they're just right about there. And I think Taylor goes out there once again. That is a big game. Tyrone Tracy, if he plays, he's a start. He aggravated his ankle injury in the loss at the Atlanta Falcons in last week's ball game. And Tracy's been a dynamic back this season for the New York Giants, where he could catch the football out of the backfield. He's proven he could be a 3-down back for this New York Giant team. He's been valuable in fantasy football. And also, the only problem with him has been the fumbling issues. But if Tracy does give it a go with the ankle, he's a start. And if he don't give it a go, Devin Singletary will be the starter for this Giant team. And I just don't believe the upside is there for Devin Singletary. I know this is a good matchup on paper, but Singletary, he's not much of a receiver out of the backfield, this Singletary. We haven't seen great games out of him. And early on in the season, Tyrone Tracy overtook the job at the running back position. So like I said, if you want to go into a championship game with Devin Singletary as your starter, if he starts in this game, I don't believe the ceiling is that high. The Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. Josh Jacobs, he's been a workhorse all season long for this Green Bay Packer team. One of the better running backs in all fantasy football. And it was a good offseason signing where obviously Aaron Jones, they let go and signed Jacobs up. It was his Packer team season start. Aaron Jones, speaking of him, obviously former team he's versing in this game. Been a great season with Minnesota, where they're 13-2 on the year. And I think Aaron Jones, he's been one of the best backs, surprisingly, where he stayed healthy all season for fantasy owners. So this week versus former team with a chip on his shoulder after they cut him loose, I believe he goes out there and has a good game. Vegas Raiders at the New Orleans Saints. Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah sits. I know the last couple of weeks, the numbers have been pretty decent for Madison and Amir Abdullah, with Zamir White on IR and Sia McCormick on IR as well, where these are the 2 last running backs standing for this Vegas Raider team. But it's tough to trust them even in a championship matchup. I know Madison, in between the tackles, he's getting the touches and the goal line work. And Abdullah, he's been the passing downs back and one of the better passing down backs in the last few weeks. But this week, even in a decent matchup, it's tough to trust him. This it's Kendre Miller. He's a flex option in bets this week here. It's a good matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. But this offense, they're depleted. And obviously teams, they're going to zero in Kendre Miller running the football and loading the box with obviously Spencer Rattler in their quarterback. So this week it could be tough sledding even in a good matchup for Vegas Raiders. So this week, he's a flex option at best. Tennessee Titans at the Jaguars. Tony Pollard to start. It's been a solid season in his first year with Tennessee for Tony Pollard, and one of the few bright spots, him and Calvin Ridley on this offense. So this week in a great matchup with Jacksonville, he's a start. Tajay Spears is a sit. I know the last couple of weeks he's definitely found the end zone and put up numbers, is Tajay Spears, but it was a lot of garbage time in last week's game where he found the end zone twice, and even going back weeks ago as well, in garbage time he found the end zone. So this week in a matchup where I believe it's going to be a close game, two teams that have struggled all season long, he's a sit. Travis Etienne, a flex option. He's a receiving back and in between the tackle back for this Jacksonville Jaguar. This week, a decent matchup versus Tennessee Titans. I think ETN could go out there. He could have a decent ball game for Jacksonville. He's a flex option. Tank Bigsby, I know he found the end zone last week. We know he don't do anything in the passing game, and he's strictly in between the tackle running back is Bigsby. I know he had a couple good games this season, but this backfield's tough to trust in general. So he's a sit this week, Miami Dolphins. Achane, he's a start each and every week. It's been a great season for Devon Achane with this Miami Dolphin team. He goes out there, can catch the football out of the backfield. I know the yards per carry haven't been great, but he's a home run hitter, and this week in a good matchup at the Browns, he's a start. Raheem Mostert, he's a sit for me in this ball game. Mostert, it's just been a down year. After last season, he had 21 total touchdowns for this Dolphin team. So this week, like I said, he gets a couple touches here and there as Mostert. He hasn't been a fantasy option all season. He's a sit. Jerome Ford, a flex option. Last week, he came out of the gate hot early in that ball game with a 50-yard-plus run, but they couldn't do much in the second half of that game. I know he found the end zone with Jerome Ford, but this week, a matchup versus Miami where their run defense has been pretty good over the last couple of weeks. At best, he's a flex option. Deonta Foreman, he's a sit. He's the goal line back and in between the tackles, early down back at times. But this week versus Miami, he's a sit as Foreman. And I know over the last couple of seasons, filling in for multiple teams when it was with the Panthers with Christian McCaffrey, then last season with the Chicago Bears for Herbert, he put up some numbers. But this week, he's a sit for me as Foreman. Dallas Cowboys at the Eagles, Rico Dotto. He's a flex option. Dotto last week, he didn't have a good game after coming off of 3 games in a row over 100 yards. So this week could be a game where Dallas is trailing early and often versus one of the better teams in the league in the Philadelphia Eagles, and especially their defense has been great this season. So he's a flex. Saquon Barkley, he got off to that monster start with 110 yards on the ground in the first quarter last week, and then once Jalen Hurts went down with injury, his numbers dropped off and they were loading the box. But Barkley, he's trying to get that 2,000 yards this season. We don't know if he's going to get it. He might fall short. Best running back in fantasy football, he's a start. Atlanta Falcons. At the Commanders, Bijan Robinson, he's lived up to the bill this season as a top 5 pick in most fantasy leagues. So this week with a good matchup with the Commanders where their run defense isn't all that great, Bijan Robinson could do it all, catch the football out of the backfield, physical in between the tackles, and he's had a great season. He's a star. Tyler Algier, still one of the better backups in the league. He could easily start right now with Tyler Algier for 10, 15 teams, in my opinion. So this week, like I said, the workload just hasn't been there for Algier this season. He's a sit. Brian Robinson Jr., he's a start. Physical in between the tackle, running back. His numbers have been decent. And we know once that ball's within the 5-yard line, he's finding the end zone. Once he gets the touch, is Brian Robinson. So this week in a matchup versus a Falcon defense that isn't all that great, he's a start. In the final game of the week, Detroit Lions at the 49ers on Monday night. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's been a great player all season long. And now with the workload going up over the last couple weeks, with David Montgomery out for the season with the knee injury, Jahmyr Gibbs is taking it to a next level. He's been one of the best backs in all fantasy football from his rookie season last year and this season. And once again this week in a matchup at San Francisco where their run defense has been leaky, he's a start. Isaac Orendo, we'll see if he returns in this game for the San Francisco 49ers. I thought he was going to play in last week's game after he played off the sprained foot in a short week, but obviously that didn't come to fruition, and they obviously had lapses in the run game last week with San Francisco. So if Orendo plays, he's a start. And Patrick Taylor, he was the starting running back last week. He didn't do much. Deebo Samuel mixed in as well. They almost had the same touches. And if Orendo's out, Taylor's not going to have value one way or the other, I believe. With Deebo getting those touches as well, he's a sit. So that's running back start sit every matchup for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.